So I just want to say welcome. I hope you're already having a lovely day. The sun shone for us, which has been so welcome. And it's lovely seeing so many here, old and new. I'm not saying young and old, but we certainly have current students, just left students, students who were here a long time ago, and people that I've never met before. And you're all very welcome. So thank you so much for coming. The concept of what we're trying to do this afternoon is to really just think a little bit about Wolfson as we move to the future. You'll know that we are currently having a master plan of the estate made that will actually say, well, what could the estate look like? What could Wolfson College look like as a building, as a place where we live and study and work in the next sort of 30, 50 years? And in doing that, the architects who came along to do that were amazing, because they talked to all people in college, to staff, to students, they sent out notes to alumni, I hope you all got them, to fellows, to researchers, to those in education, and just to find out what was it about Wolfson that if we move forward to the future is something we will never lose, something that we will keep with us as the essence of what we are at Wolfson. And that's a bit that I'd like to explore today. And who we have here today, I'm delighted people. You've got a programme, so I won't introduce them to you in detail, or will take up all our time. But we have three guests here from the past. We have Gordon Johnson, a past president. We've got James, who is a past a student and a past part-time student, because one of our future things that we are embracing is being the home for part-time students. And we've got Karen, who did a PhD here in 1999, who were here. And so we have the past represented here. But we also have the present of Wolfson here. And Ibs. You're here all the time. I mean, I always think of you as still being current. And Ibs, of course, who is a part-time undergraduate student. And we thank you for coming back and for all the contributions you have actually made since you left, because all of you have been involved in Wolfson ever since you left. And then to represent the future, we have Annoa, who just at first, in her first year, doing HSPS. While she's been enormously active in college. We've got Cezary, who is a junior research fellow at Wolfson, and again he's contributed hugely to life in the college. And then the very senior end of the panel, James Wood, who's head of the vet school, one of our senior fellows, and who's awarded an OBE this year. So we've got a very distinguished panel for you. So Gordon is our resident historian here, so I've asked Gordon to start off really reflecting on where Wolfson came from and putting it in the context of the university. Not much to do there. Thank you.
Well, I'll try. For those of us born in the first half of the 20th century, it's really quite difficult to grasp just how much change has occurred in the last 70 or 80 years, and particularly from the 1950s onwards. Usually this is expressed in material ways. We are healthier, we are cleaner, we live longer, we have more clothes to wear, we are better housed, we are better fed, all of those things, and that has been true for most of the population. But I just want to peg now, because I think it's important for considering the future, that those benefits have not been universally shared and are not equally distributed, even now. And the way in which those benefits have occurred has largely been because of the huge expansion of education, first in the schools. This country was really quite slow getting off the mark with decent secondary education. And now that we only read about how bad everything is, it's worth remembering that it is actually very, very much better and very, very much more optimistic in its history than we can regard. And the second thing that's happened is that following the First World War, there was suddenly a great understanding that the increase in knowledge was important to improve the lives and the well-being of the population. And that was reinforced with developments through the 30s and given an extra stimulus during the Second World War and beyond. So universities have played a very important part in that development. You wouldn't believe, really, if you just sit back and think about it, though it's obvious, how important an increase in general levels of literacy have been and how important the expansion of research has been. And the increase in literacy is not just to do with discovering new things and creating new medicines and new means of transport and all of that, but it's actually led to greater cultural opportunities, greater appreciation of the outdoors, greater appreciation of nature, greater use of recreation. It's contributed to the whole well-being of society. There's been an expansion too, if you like, of access to music, sport, art, literature, and all of these things are tremendously important. And that's the general background to where the university fits, and this university in particular fits. Because a fact about Cambridge is that although people say it's that stuffy old place that's been going for 800 years, and it's very elitist and very inward-looking and very traditional, and it's really quite a dreadful place. You have only to read the newspapers every day to see that said. Of course, that's not true, because what has happened is that Cambridge has changed enormously. The increase in good secondary education, for instance, in the 20th century, has led to an increase in diversity and access to the university's educational offering through the colleges and the first degrees and so on. So almost more than a doubling in my lifetime of undergraduate students in Cambridge. And as far as the research end goes, initially, even when I was a research student myself, there were about 1,000 of us in Cambridge, and we were nearly all Cambridge graduates. We didn't know what we wanted to do, so we just stayed. But now there are 6,000 of us and endless numbers of postdocs, beyond belief a sizable number of postdocs. And the whole research side of the university has blossomed beyond belief. We didn't have medical school when I was an undergraduate and a research student, and the thought that Cambridge would become a great biomedical campus research centre, doing so much in the present times, was a very strange thought in the 1960s. James's Department of Veterinary Science was really way, way outside the normal limits of the university. They were doing some good work in the veterinary school, but when the veterinary school was opened in the 1950s, there were snide remarks about how, well, people would have to hire a charabanc to drive out there and find where it was, because it was so marginal to the mainline interests of the university. But now all that has sort of been overcome in really interesting ways, because the great increase in people being educated and the great increase in people doing research, and the way in which research in particular has opened up to ideas from absolutely anywhere and everywhere. And of course those ideas ideas they're not race specific or gender specific or nationality specific or culturally specific, but they need, in order to fructify, they need to come together and to spark off each other. Because one of the interesting things, if you look at research or if you look at universities generally, is we all bang on about excellence. This is what we do. We're excellent. We want to bang on about excellence. And the trouble with excellence is that, of course, you tend only too often to reinforce what you already have. What you don't do is you don't necessarily think that new ways of thinking and new pieces of evidence are going to fit into your subject. The best examples, of course, do come from science. If you think of a subject like botany or physiology or genetics, they have been absolutely transformed in the course of the last half-century. But even on the art side, if you think in terms of archaeology or anthropology, or what we think of as being a good historical line of inquiry, that too has broadened and has been enriched by having new ideas and new people come into the field. So what happens? Well, Cambridge actually, it's a miserable little town on this sluggish river in this flat area, only 30 feet above sea level. A middling sort of place, not too much scope to do anything very much. But it's also, of course, quite a beautiful place. But it has grown unbelievably in size, and it has burst at the seams, so that accommodating that growth, accommodating that change, has been very difficult and very challenging, and it has been surmounted splendidly. And this is where a place like Wolfson has played and will continue to play an absolutely sort of key role in this development. Because what you need are places that will encourage the serendipitous meeting of minds, places that will be tolerant but will be quite tough in standing up for what they think is right, because this is, after all, some sort of quest for truth, some sort of quest for a meaning of life, some sort of understanding that you are not going to get it right, no matter what, no matter how firm your science, no matter how good your reading, no matter how good your decoding of language, and so on. It's all a work in progress. And so what you need is a university that is able to accommodate that won't bunker down into silos with their subjects, that will open to new views, that will mix people up, that will, in lots of ways, encourage people to just look, to be curious. And of course, a college like Wolfson is a place where that has happened. In the 1960s, it was a common thought that research did not need colleges. Research was in departments. That's where you worked, that's where you had your social life, that's where the coffee machine was, that's where you met the head of department and all your friends and so on. But Wolfson and the other graduate foundations of the 1960s have proved to Cambridge, which is the first important step, that that was not actually the right way to go. That there was a place for colleges, that colleges provide a nice environment in which to live, which is always very helpful, because happy people can do great things, that they provide all the things that we think are ancillary, good accommodation, sporting, musical, literary, artistic opportunities, the chance just to discuss, the chance not to discuss, the chance to disagree and not sort of fly off the handle, the chance to learn about other people, to enjoy who your neighbour is. So, and I think one can sort of bring that back to the real world in an interesting way that occurred to me just earlier today, because an awful lot of MasterChef goes on in our household. And it occurred to me that actually, one thinks of the university and education and research as being all otherworldly stuff and not related to anything real or in particular. And there's a whole Philistine trend in this country that continually reinforces that. And of course, if you think of cooking is actually a subset of chemistry and physics and zoology and botany. And you start to look around your life more generally. And that is true over and over again. We could not be so clean, we could not be so well dressed, we could not be so well housed if we had not acquired all this knowledge, and if research and education had not shown us that we can actually live in a very enjoyable way. It's not going to be easy, and we're not going to get it right, and not everybody is going to benefit, but that's the challenge, that one has to just keep going over and over again. And Wolfson has been wonderful at doing that.
Thank you, Gordon. That's a really, I didn't know what I was expecting, but a great start. So thank you very much. So I asked the panel if what they could do would be sort of just reflect on how well, what would it have been if you'd been to Cambridge really and not been at Wolfson? What was it about the Wolfson bit of that experience which you think either you've taken with you or you're beginning to grasp, but depending on how long you've been? Why don't we start with you, Karen?
Okay.
I think this is the only one.
They all work.
They all work.
You don't have to just push the button. That's right.
Yeah. Thank you, Jane. It's really lovely to be here. I'm Brazilian, and I got a scholarship from the Brazilian government to come here for 4 years in 1999. And it was fantastic because first they accepted me, so this is just like wow. And then second, Wolfson provided a place. I think Gordon was the president at my time, and I think Gordon and his team and all the students provided a place for each one of us to be ourselves, but at the same time allowing for others to be themselves. Because it's very easy to be yourself, but you have to allow for others to be themselves. And what I liked about Wolfson as well is that diversity and inclusion, that now is called the Annoa, that is very fancy in all the business and everywhere in the world. It began here, was a place of birth for diversity and inclusion, and the history and the entire beginning of Wolfson was based in diversity and inclusion, and not like a check box for saying, oh, we have diversity and inclusion.
Yeah. Thank you. James, you're probably, you were here as a part-time student, is that right?
Yes, I was. I matriculated in 2004, and I think very similar to you. When I got the letter, I got accepted. I thought, wow, this is a good day. And I think to me, Wolfson, what actually brought me here was the academic excellence. When I still remember the first dinner that we had. I was sitting next to a professor on my right, and then I was speaking to a PhD student on my left. And it was fantastic in terms of the discussion, the level of discussion, but also what I learned from, there's actually more to life than architecture. I'm a simple architect, and I only knows about how to put buildings together. But through talking to Gordon before, the way how people are brought together, the way how we have very intellectual discussion, but also the research work that people was doing. I thought that was really interesting, and that really brought me to I was actually here part time during when you guys are away, we come, and that make a big difference. But also when when you guys are here, I try to take time away from work to come here to actually enjoy Wolfson. So that was probably what actually made it different for me.
Thank you. So Ibs, you came here in a slightly different sort of mood.
Yeah, so I am one of the few people that actually didn't apply to Wolfson directly. I had no idea what Wolfson was until I got my offer letter. Having said that, whether it was from fate, it was probably one of the best decisions that could happen in my career. So I came to Wolfson in 2016, not knowing anything about it, but I was very intimidated of Cambridge as an institution. I'm from Hackney, East London, from a very, very different background. The idea of castles and the word bursar and presidents, it scared me a lot. But like you said, I also came for the academic excellent aspects of Wolfson. And I think for me, we mentioned diversity and inclusion. When I think of Wolfson, I also think of diversity, inclusion and equity. And I think it's one of the few colleges in not just Cambridge, but also Cambridge and Oxford, that really acknowledges not only do we have diverse talent of students, but what can we do to incorporate equitable measures in trying to make sure that their experience is as good as it can be, not only in terms of welfare and mental health, but also that they can get the best type of learning and teaching. And so, it's been 4 years now since I matriculated, and I wear Wolfson like a badge. It's kind of scary. I was in Malaysia very recently, and I was this close. I was in Malaysia to see my flatmate, who I met in our block. We were this close to getting a tattoo of the Wolfson crest, just to show how much we love it here. It's nice.
Really, how disappointing. You really let me down here. Next time will be, next alumni, it'll be your year. Comes, we expect to see that.
We'll get matching tattoos.
Thank you. So, this is a bit of the past. What I'm hoping to find out is how Wolfson is driving us into the future. And to see, maybe for the people who are current members of Wolfson, what part do you think that how we're moving forward, and what are we not doing quite so well? It's lovely that you're all singing the praises. You don't have to rubbish us, please. But should there be some ambition for looking to the future? We are not an old traditional college where this is how we've always done it. Trinity continues doing what Trinity does. Trinity will continue being Trinity and being successful and extraordinarily rich and powerful and all those things. I think that also we should be more ambitious than just continuing to be what we are. And so something for you to think about is, what are we still doing well, but where should we be moving towards? And James, I'm going to throw that to you first, to give the others a little bit of chance. So I think you have to push it up, please. Thank you. That's it.
So I think one of the things that attracted me about Wolfson is the fact that it is thinking of the future and has been a pathfinder through Cambridge in terms of driving a lot of positive change, the sorts of things that we've just been hearing about. And I think that one of the challenges with the Cambridge system that we've also heard about is the intimidation. People feel like they're not coming in. And I think that Wolfson does so much to break all of these things down and must continue to do that. But actually, there's so much more to be done as well. The reputation of Cambridge is always referred to that everything's wrong with the place if you read in the newspapers. Actually, there are so many fantastic things that happen here. There are so many brilliant ways that Wolfson is driving the inclusion agenda. But I think driving this sort of agenda around how we live outside of a lot of our sites is one thing. One of the things that Wolfson is now doing more of, and James really pushed this agenda forward since being president, are the whole subject of themes, where we bring our work to the colleges. And actually the colleges are fantastic at facilitating, particularly multidisciplinary studies, which still are hard in Cambridge. I mean, they're not impossible, but they're made easier by what the colleges bring to Cambridge, in terms of mixing disciplines up just naturally. And I think mixing experiences up and not sticking all professors in one row and everything following a linear direction beneath that. I think actually the way that we mix up here is critical to our success in terms of driving genuine inclusion and diversity. So the sorts of hubs that we have developing here in global health, in sustainability and so on, which are two areas very close to my heart, are absolutely fantastic. And I think that we will see far more of this coming through Wolfson, probably through some of the other colleges, because we do some of these things with other colleges, other graduate colleges, and I think that is a strength of Wolfson, that we can actually try and drive change in the university, and long may that continue.
Thank you, James. Thank you. One of the groups of people that I think we're not aware enough of is our great researchers, and our junior research fellows are an amazing bunch of people, and they're so talented. We appoint about 10 every year, and when we got to the end of the last year, only one was still in Cambridge, and he had a position. I mean, he was trying to do ground research still here, because the others had all left before their time. So, Cezary, introduce yourself and how, I mean, you tell people what you do, but also how sort of being part of a college has changed what you've done.
Thank you, Jane. Gosh, that feels like a lot of pressure when you said about the last year.
Absolutely.
I need to be doing more.
You got 6 months.
You got 6 months. Although you have extended that.
I have extended you back. Because of COVID.
Well, I think that the last year and a half especially have obviously been really challenging, and I think I joined 2.5 years ago, and I had 1 full year of normal living here in the college and sort of being a part of the family here. But then everything suddenly changed with the COVID, etc. Things closed, and I think as difficult as it was and as sad as it also was a door for new opportunities for us here in the college. And I'm a member of Humanities Society here, so we've been organising events for a very long time, and I've been involved. And I think we were one of the first societies in the college who sort of leaped onto the idea of let's move things online, let's do webinars, etc. And we realized fairly quickly that it worked really well. And I think many other societies after us realized, well, we can do it too if they can. So that was really good.
If the historians can manage technology, then the scientists can.
Exactly. But I think the discussion over here, and especially the mentions of 2 things. One, the sort of different disciplines and mixing disciplines, etc., is one thing, and the other is the sort of elite nature of the university here in Oxford, which I think has been overcome to some extent, but not fully, I would argue. There's still that sort of lingering thing when you think of Oxford, that it's a bit elite, it's perhaps inaccessible to a lot of people. And I'm an ancient historian myself, and in the field of ancient history, and obviously classics as well. There's this assumption that there is a big sort of barrier to join, which is language. You need your Latin, you need your Greek to be able to do it. And I think historically for the university, I mean for most of the history of the university, if you wanted to be admitted, you needed to know Latin. That was a formal requirement. That has changed only last century, actually. But in the faculty over here, in classics, it still lingers on somehow. That if you want to be successful and if you want to be enrolled, you need to have some knowledge. And of course, the extent of your knowledge will be based on your education, the one you receive from your school. So that is now a big sort of debate in the field to what extent it's necessary to have excellent knowledge of Latin and Greek to understand ancient history. And one thing which I thought is my voice in the debate was to leap onto the idea of doing webinars. And I had wonderful support from the college, because they basically said, do whatever you want, we trust you. I'm not sure they knew what they were doing, but what I wanted to do was I'm a historian of ancient warfare, so I look at war, how it affects society, the people, etc. And what I wanted to do is I wanted to run a series of webinars which would introduce people to different approaches to how we can look at war and ancient world in general, for which you don't need the knowledge of languages, and in fact, which would approach the subject from different disciplines. So we run webinars on ancient warfare and mythology, ancient warfare and video games, ancient warfare and films, etc., to bring as many people as we could and to show that you don't need the knowledge of language. Whatever expertise you bring with you might actually be useful and helpful. And we ran those webinars last year, over 3 months, I think, where they were enormously popular. I was overwhelmed by how many people we had every week actually live in attendance. So the fact that I was allowed to do it, and the fact that I was allowed to show that you can do it, and whatever experience you bring is good, valuable, and useful, was really good. And one other thing which I strongly believe in is that if you want to attract people and if you want to be inclusive, you need to try and meet your audience on their own sort of terms. And these days, when you think of ancient world and ancient history, the entry point for a lot of people will be things like video games, films like 300, which I'm sure many of you have seen here. So if you try and approach the wider audience on the terms that they understand, things they've seen, things they do, it's far easier to sort of have a discussion, be inclusive, and invite them into the world of academic research. And I think this is something which we are doing here. I hope we will be doing it. So I hope that the webinar format will sort of stay in a hybrid form, however it will be. Yes, I'm really looking forward to it.
Thank you. I went to those, and they were fantastic. And I have no Latin. Thank you. So Anna, really, I mean, then we'll open up this discussion for anybody to have anything, and for you from the audience too. But so you've been here the least time. You've just finished your first year. Thank you, Anna's come up. Thank you for breaking your vacation and coming out to see us. I mean, you came to do a particular degree, HSPS. I mean, you might sort of tell us how you decided to do HSPS in Cambridge. But what I'd like to explore with you really is the way that by being in a college rather than going, because you were at another university before, the way that the college life can add dimensions to how you can develop, not only as a student and as an academic, but also how you can develop other dimensions, and maybe tell us what we could do more to encourage and support that.
Hello? Okay, that works. Yeah, that's true. So I was actually at UCL, I was doing PPE. And while I really, really loved it, I think being here and being in a college, the feel is very different. Every college, I feel like, has their own personality, has their own characteristics, and what I loved about Wolfson was the diversity, actually. So when I was looking at the mature colleges that I wanted to apply to, it wasn't a very well-researched thing. I was just kind of looking on websites. And actually, it was IBS that kind of inspired me to apply here specifically. And I was watching your videos on YouTube, and I was like, wait a second, Wolfson, that's where IBS goes, that's where IBS goes. And so I applied, and that is honestly almost the entire reason. Because, which is good, you can tell me that. But that was almost the entire reason, and the reason for that was because it was a broken barrier for me. I saw someone that was a person of colour, that was from London, that didn't sound, what I expected Cambridge people to sound like, no offence. In terms of accent. And that was quite encouraging. And so getting here and being able to explore that more has been really freeing. And one of the things that we are doing at the moment is the Shading Cambridge podcast, which I love recording. And that kind of speaks to how we as a college, I think, are pushing boundaries in terms of what we discuss, the kind of culture that we want to be as a college, and where we want to inspire the rest of the university to go. So the Shady Cambridge podcast is an anti-racist podcast, and we just talk about things that we think are relevant to do with racism, anti-racism, the intersections of race and class and race and sexuality and all of these things. And yeah, I think it's an inspiring thing that we do as a college, that we are kind of leading, kind of being a pioneer in that sense. And so the college system has kind of really helped me to find a family, and to really find a place where I fit in as a person that typically would not apply, or at least in my view, typically wouldn't apply to Cambridge, and typically wouldn't be the person you think of when you think of a student at Cambridge. So yeah.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's wonderful. And one of the things that we haven't mentioned, but which is very clear, is also the internationality of Wolfson. The very nature of that moving forward. And well, I mean, on our panel here, 3 of you represent sort of 3 different continents, right? So, I mean, which is extraordinary, and we didn't pick you for that. And one of the things I also wanted to pick up is the impact that some of our research is having. Researchers in Wolfson are doing research in fields which will be of global impact. James is involved with research on zoonotic viruses, the sort of viruses that leap from animals to humans, who knew. But has been involved in that for a long time in Africa, and is involved in Cambridge in Africa and these sorts of initiatives. And I think one of the things which I hope that we will do more in the college moving forward is getting more involved in global issues that are there. But the other thing that I want to thank you for saying is, Annoa, for instance, just said, well, the college is doing this. These are students in the college who are taking initiatives. And I said, Wolfson's doing it. And it is Wolfson's doing it, but this is a college where it's not the president and the fellows are initiating this. And your Wolfson in your Warfare Wednesdays, and the work that you did, none of this was the college setting up saying, right, we will now do something. It's giving people opportunities, I think, which is the best thing. We want to think about how we can build on that and grow that further forward. Does anybody in the audience want to make a comment, or anybody else like to comment further? I'm sure there have been lots of ideas and thoughts here. Please, go ahead.
Yeah. My name's Piat. I was sent here by my company on the Wolfson course, which is run by Jack King. I think I'm probably the back to 1981. Don't know whether else was. So I've got the privilege that I could step back and come in a couple of times here, and what do I see? In some ways, things haven't changed. What hasn't changed, I think, is one of the greatest powers that Wolfson has, and that is its inclusiveness and its diversity, but primarily it's the fact that it's very warm and it's very welcoming, and it provides, I think, a fantastic nurturing environment within which people can grow and develop. And I saw that 40 years ago, I see it now, and I think it's one of Wolfson's truly greatest strengths, is the environment which it offers to people to allow them to develop the encouragement, and I think that is so important. Where I think as well, I might close on the fact that I think the personality officer that I had at the time has forgiven me for what was the biggest bar bill ever incurred on the Wolfson course. So having spent some time with John Penny, who was in the Wynne Godley's economics department, I said, well, it's a Gaussian distribution curve, Audrey, named the personnel officer, and I must be at the other end. She said, absolutely right, it is a Gaussian distribution curve. You happen to be twice as big and far to the right as anybody else. I thought, well, it must have been the champagne networking party that we had after the formal dinner. Did you enjoy it? I said, everybody else did. It was worth it. And I can say about Wolfson, it's worth it. But you have to let people know. You have to share. And I think that Wolfson is so inclusive and so warm that just by sharing and making that widely known. You don't have to brag. Just let the atmosphere breathe for itself. I think it's wonderful. So I love coming back, and thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. And do feel free to spend freely at the bar. To pay back to our profits when we have that. Thank you. Is anyone? Yes, please. Would you like to, if you don't mind taking one of these, then it will catch on the recording. Sorry, I should have passed that to you.
I'm Henrik Schindler. I was matriculated in 2006, so doing architecture first, a master and then a PhD in architecture. But my perspective, I think for me the most valuable experience in Wolfson actually is that we can see people's pathways they've gone through, because you meet people in all walks of life, different stages, different backgrounds, and seeing how they have achieved what they wanted to achieve in all sorts of different ways. So there's not necessarily one way of achieving. And I find this for me is actually a very valuable lesson for myself. I mean, having the last 10 years developed my academic career, and exploring a new field and being quite successful in that way, I couldn't have been able to have that courage and that ability to visualize what maybe an academic might go in a career life look like compared to what others might look like. And I think Wolfson being really fundamental in that way that we could encounter people who were professors, OBEs, alongside PhD students and undergraduates, and seeing how they're all in different lives. I've seen people from captains of industry joining in formal dinners. And there's that sort of thing about what I might say is this sense of courage and wanting to take initiative to make something. I think it's something for me personally.
That's really nice, and I think it builds on something that Gordon said once, is that Wolfson, when it started off, was daring to try something different, daring to try something new, and I think that's what you're talking about. What other things are there? Let's try an initiative. Let's do something. If it doesn't work, well, what have you lost? Some people may have enjoyed it and some people may have grown, but it could become something really big and really important.
I think the essence of this is that actually intellectual discovery is a very hard thing to do, and growing up is a very hard thing to do. And what you're doing is you're shedding prejudices and you're learning about other things and about other people. And of course one sometimes knows that you're aware of what your prejudices are. You're aware of what sort of cultural constraints you operate under, but not always. And to have a place like this brings out into the open the sort of things where you have to change your mind or your way of thinking, or you do say, yes, there are lots of different ways of developing and being good and creative. A small anecdote. A friend of mine who did the MB in the 1980s told me quite recently that the first paper in the first MB exam that she did, she'd been at Oxford and she came here, and the first paper in the MB exam that she did, and she was a woman, you see, this is a woman in medicine, and so she said, and they were in the exam, and the Regis professor was, presiding over the opening up of the exam, and he said, turn over the page, and the first question on the paper was, take any character from Shakespeare and diagnose the medical history. Okay. So, of course, in lots of ways, one would say that was, what a clever question. What a really good question that was. How demanding. But of course, it makes endless assumptions about, even I wouldn't have known enough Shakespeare to be able to do that question. And I think one of the revelations for me in recent years is the way in how many of those concealed traps there are that we just don't understand And I think one of the great merits of Wolfson, and we have made a thing of it. We have made a thing of it right from the start, actually. You know, the first president was a confident, arrogant Trinity man like me. Okay? And he knew that he wanted certain things, the things that we fall back on, the no high table, the being nice to families, the having musical evenings, all of that sort of thing as being important in the creation of a new college. And the challenge that he had, and that David Williams had, and that I had, and that you now have, is to create this sort of cultural environment in which people will meet each other. And they will talk. And they will see that there are lots of ways of doing things, and it's fun. It's really fun. That's what's so important.
Yes, do go ahead. I encourage any of you, grab a microphone and please.
I'd like just to share some ideas I've been
I
discussing.
think it's very much like Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. I would like to share some ideas I have been discussing with Sheehan Cook and Charles Barty King on the Sustainability and Conservation Hub, because they are doing an amazing job on the COP26. So Wolfson College is doing mocks of how to negotiate COP26, of how to understand the financing issues and the developing country issues and the transfer technology issues. And I'm so proud that I'm part of it. I'm helping them to make sense of the COPs, because I've been more than 20 years participating on that. And one thing that was amazing as well was to be able to mentor Ray White. She's doing a master's, a sociology master's in climate change and memes. And she contacted me for asking for how to go to COP26. How do you do it? What do you do when you get there? And how to, because it's like a city, you need to know where to go. So it was so fantastic being able to actually share my memories and my knowledge with someone who was actually interested. Because I'm normally boring people that don't want to hear of how you should do it. And it was so fantastic as well to see. Because when she said climate change and memes, and she asked me, do you know what a meme is? I said, of course I do. I'm a 40-year-old child, so I know what a meme is. But I was thinking, how? How? Climate change and meme? How? And then, when we had the talk, I completely understood. It's like the language, and she explained to me, for instance, when all the memes are very negative, what happens is people feel less like separate recycling or taking the bicycle or not going to that amazing holiday in Barbados because they think, oh, it's all going badly anyway, so why should I do anything? And she was explaining that of how this changed the behavior, the means change people's behavior globally. Yeah, so I'd like to share this. Thank you.
That's fantastic. And it emphasises the role that I think we're good at Wolfson is engaging our alumni to come back and join in with things. With the Sustainability Hub, with the global health events that we've held. And that's been good. Do either of you, would you, please do.
I think one of the things that I find everyone is very open is the college life actually don't end when you finish. I've actually, when I went back to Hong Kong, I've been here for 30 years. And when I went back to Hong Kong, I actually went to the Duman office and asked, is there any Wolfson College members over there? And actually, when I used to travel before COVID, I used to go to Middle East a lot, I used to go to China a lot, and we were doing things, building things there. But I always try to go back to the university and ask, is there anyone there who would like to have dinner with me? I don't want to just eat by myself. I think that was one thing I find, people, when you go back to universities, when you come back to college, and they're really helpful and try to connect people. I think one of the things that I'd like to probably, for those of you who don't know, Wolfson Connect, please sign up. I think that's really useful, and I think you actually get all of us together, because you only know me from seeing my face, but I would love to know you more. So please connect, and I think that is one thing that we're doing really well as a community, as a college.
No, that's good to know. Yes.
Yeah, I just
thoughts?
wanted to add, which was, I had a very similar experience. I went to Malaysia, my favorite place in the world, and Sean emailed me a contact of a professor who matriculated, I think, in the early 2000s. And first I thought she was setting me up on a date, and then I realised that when I actually met this individual, probably now one of my closest friends ever. And then through this individual, I met Professor Elizabeth Lee, who also is based in Malaysia, and that kind of network that you have, just from saying I went to Wolfson, is phenomenal. And I never really understood the importance of kind of internationalism until I went abroad. Because of where I'm from, my kind of view of what internationalism is like Zone 6 on the London Underground or Cocktail. So when you actually go abroad and you take advantage of it. And I think just going off what you said, Wolfson Connect, but also just as alumni, constantly kind of wearing that badge of Wolfson when it comes to branding. And if it's little things like even on LinkedIn, I don't know how much of a fan people are of LinkedIn, but when you say you're at Wolfson, whether it's students who are prospective or recent graduates, they can find us very quickly just through searching the word Wolfson on social media. So I think you're absolutely right about trying to stay connected is so important, because regardless of how Cambridge is going to be perceived, for every generation of students who matriculate, they're going to be nervous. They're going to think that Cambridge is histrionic and scary. And I feel like every year there's going to be different needs and different wants. But in trying to remove those barriers, sometimes reaching out to past, present, and future is so important. So yeah, I think networking is just absolutely key.
Great. Yes, could you grab one? Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you. Well, I first came here in 1975, which is before most people were born, and I've returned again as a student. If we're looking to the future of Wolfson, maybe we could think about Wolfson being a place that challenges the status quo rather than accepts it. Because we look around this room, we see the diversity. We see a place and a diversity that probably wouldn't have existed 50 years ago. And the world is going backwards in some ways, but I hope in some ways is going forwards, in that we understand the importance of diversity now. And that diversity means that excellence rises to the top, not people from necessarily a privileged background. So we're challenging the status quo, but we're promoting excellence. And I think what being educated is about asking the right questions, is about challenging, but is about searching for the answers to those challenges so that we all, as a world and as a college, understand more than we did before. And for me, if you add that to the fact that Wolfson is a small college, so it's like a village, if you like, for me, that's what Wolfson stands for.
Thank you. That's fantastic. Please, could you pass it behind you? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here today with my fellow alumni from 30 years ago, so I think that shows what Wolfson means to us. But going forward, I'd like to talk about potential. So in the past, one joined a company and stayed with them for quite a few years, and your development and your professional development and was through that company. So now, in terms of the gig economy, we're all professionals and we need to start taking more responsibility for our own development. So I was just thinking, is there a role for Wolfson in that going forward? Sort of helping us with mentorship, continuous professional development in whatever field you're in, bringing us back once a year, maybe in the summer, to carry that on.
That's really important, an important idea. And I mean, many of you know that I've changed my career 3 times, and I think that is important. And one of the things which we're increasingly investing in is in the part-timers. So the people who are doing part-time masters. So we graduated some people this morning, and one of them had been fed up with his job as a consultant, so he came back here to do a master, a part-time master. In fact, this was something I matriculated last night, not graduated today. That's, but that's changed, and he's doing a part-time masters in sustainability and the built environment. So enabling students doing those part-time courses is important. But I think it's important, something that we should talk to Sean about and sort of challenge Sean about, the idea that within our Wolfson network, through Wolfson Connect that you're talking about there, we could look at we already have a part-time study week where all part-time students, no matter what their course they come on, can take a week out, come to Wolfson, they do study, they get study skills, they get some sort of shut up and write sessions so they can get on with their research, they have a formal hall, they go hunting, they can regain those things as well as coming together. And it's not beyond, I mean, it would be a fantastic idea, it's not beyond the grounds of possibility that we could have sort of network weekends. I mean, this is a bit of one, but where at a time when our rooms are pretty empty, not that there are many of those at the moment, the person sitting behind you going, where are the rooms, Jane? but it's not beyond the words or sort of weekends to do that. So, or even, as Cezary said, we've been very successful at doing online things. I mean, we invested just before lockdown in sort of live streaming things, and we can do mixtures of things. And I think was one of the things. I think that's a really good idea.
I think the Institute of Manufacturing, they do offer them to us, but they're quite prohibitive in cost. They're about £3,000 unless you've got company sponsorship.
Yeah.
So I think the use of webinars would be a really good way forward.
Yeah. No, I mean, I don't think it's impossible. Or to get some sponsorships from some of your companies to offer that. Any other comments? James, please.
So often in Cambridge we focus on the big idea, and this is going to be sort of world-changing things. And I think one of the things that just reflecting on what Wolfson brings and what Wolfson can do. We're very privileged to be anywhere near Cambridge, to be in Cambridge, and there's fantastic people here. And it's sometimes very hard for even fantastic people to find their feet. And I think one of the things that Wolfson does so well is to provide a community to give people the confidence to grow and to realise their potential. And I think that sometimes in Cambridge we're so busy thinking about how we're going to be world-changing. And actually, one of the things that we really need to remember is that it's people that change the world. And what we need to do, I think, here with the community of Wolfson, is to provide that confidence and that safe place for people to grow from. And I think that's one of the things that we must never lose, because it's the people that are going to make the changes. It's not a huge programme, it's not a big idea, it's going to be the people that do that. I think one of the things that Wolfson does so well, and must continue to try and do so well into the future, as we think about doing more things, is to retain that sense of place and purpose, that we're here to try and do good things and to support each other in doing that, and to challenge each other when we get things wrong and so on. But it's a small thing, but I think that the people side of that, the people side of the college, is so important. It's really important to remember that as we're making big plans for the future.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And in fact, the way that alumni can play a role, just like you have, Ray, and other people have come for mentoring, and when you, as a current student, get new students, give them that support, I think that's really indicative of why the alumni are such an important part of our community, and where sort of these research hubs and other things that we do have been so enriched by having alumni come along. And again, it's the personal links that our alumni can make, which is so important. And thank you, that's really important. We've kind of come to the end of, doesn't an hour go quickly? I hope that I know that some of you sort of want to go off and rush up and brush up and brush down that tie. But I hope that you will continue to have a lovely day today. I want to thank all of you for coming. It's really generous of you to give up your time to come. I hope that all of you will carry on this conversation and do join Wolfson Connect and talk to Sian about some of these ideas and how our alumni community can build more. Continue to enjoy the gardens. We have a champagne reception, I believe, at 7 o'clock. Is that correct? There's nothing. So is that right? There's nothing that champagne can't improve. or sparkles. I look forward to having dinner with you later on. Sean, is there anything else we need to say?
No.
Thank you, Tiffany, for organising this event.
Yeah, so I was busy taking notes as you were speaking, listening to them, but so many good ideas from people today. I think this is one of the first alumni events of these reunions that really, you the alumni are saying, this is what I've been doing, and this is what I can do more of, and this is where we think we go forward to the future. So it's really fantastic, and thank you to all the panellists.
Thank you all for coming. I look forward to talking to you more later on in the evening. Thank you.